Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. Here we are. It is another episode of Offstage. Thank you very much for being here. I am your host. I am Ward Anderson. Today, we are talking about show business, and we are talking about the comedy industry and the entertainment industry, and as it changes as you get older. I am very happy and honored to be here with some of my idols, people that I have looked up to for years and had the pleasure to work with. He is a Canadian radio legend, a very funny comedian, and also a staple. If you listen to radio very, very early in the morning, you know him as Humble Howard. He is Howard Glassman. Thank you very much.
Hey, Warren, thanks for having me, my friend. What a pleasure. Look how good you look on TV.
Oh,
Good Lord.
Yeah.
He really, seriously.
That's all the time we have. We thank you for joining us today. He is a Canadian comedy legend. He has appeared at every major comedy festival all over the country. You know him as that Canadian guy. Please welcome Glen Foster.
Glen Foster, for God's sake. For God's sake. Look at you.
Look at you.
Look at how did we get to be so fucking old?
There you go.
A man who has had numerous comedy specials all over North America, has toured back and forth, east and west, north and south. He is a Canadian comedy legend. His name is Mike MacDonald.
Come on.
Are we on?
Yes.
About time.
She is a comedy producer, a writer, and a performer. She has acted. She has done everything from perform in front of the camera to working behind the camera. She is a very talented performer. Her name is Kate Davis.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Entirely too young to be part of this.
You know, I was thinking that it's fascinating that a 40-year-old woman is on a panel with basically 6-year-old guys
Yeah.
about ageism.
Old,
So,
white,
yeah.
angry men.
Yeah, it's a good time.
You're like, this is not your thing.
If this was a movie, you'd be too old.
Exactly. You're an ingenue, for God's sake. Look at you.
But you know, that was on purpose. That was by design.
Ward. Yeah, good.
No.
Good.
Not because I see you as old, Kate, because you and I are the same age, but because there is something to be said about the shelf life for women, and women in comedy especially, is different than that of men. I wholeheartedly really do believe that. The men here, I hope, do agree with me on that.
I hope so. I really do, because there's a lot of young female talent that we really need to get rid of as they get older.
Yeah, enough. Although, you know, I'm curious. I mean, the shelf life for older performers in general, I don't know if it's, you know, gender specific. I think you get to a certain age, and we talk a little bit.
No, it is. I can guarantee you it is, because I've
Well, it is in Hollywood. It is in Hollywood in
I've
general.
literally had club owners here, like literally come up to me and go, you know, I think this is like, you know, maybe you're too old, and they would never have said it. They would never would have said it to a male comic my age.
But to finish, maybe
Ever.
Not your age.
Maybe they're saying they're
Ever.
like you're not. They're looking for a younger Kate Davis, is what they all say.
No, that's not what they said.
How old are you now?
Well, how old are you, Ward?
How old are you, Ward?
You're
Huh?
43.
43.
I'm 43.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the same
You are
age.
much younger than we are.
But
I'm
no, I'm
61.
siding with you.
Are you really?
I'm 61.
Go back to sleep.
But I'm siding
I'm
with you.
up late.
No, I literally had two club
I'm
owners say
siding
that,
with
and I
you
was like, I
because
have
my
to be
age
done.
has never come up ever, and you
Ever.
and I are the same age.
Yeah.
And so
No, for sure.
you've had it mentioned to you, and I've never. had it
Oh,
mentioned
yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
However, I think Kate would have a lot harder time if she wasn't so funny. Comedy's like the only thing, either male or female, that we
Right.
can do it till we drop dead.
I
if-
agree.
If we're funny.
And I
What
would
I-
have preferred that club owner to say, you know what, you're
Well,
not
yeah.
funny, get out of here. But they
Then
didn't.
you're
Yeah,
right.
that's
Well,
what you would
what I was
prefer.
going to say is
Yeah,
that we were
that is
talking
what
before
I
the show
prefer.
that you get to a certain age, and you know, some of the work, like I was saying to Glenn, like I love doing stand-up, but I don't want to do it for 23-year-olds anymore. There doesn't seem to be a lot of work for an older crowd where you can reference your kids and growing older, and it seems like there's less work for that.
I am going to totally disagree with that.
What the fuck, Kate?
No, I think I'm with her on that. I think if you're working the clubs, that's where the work is.
That's what I'm
for
talking
that.
about.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying you go to clubs now, and all it is 35 and unders, and I personally I don't think my humor is for them anymore. I don't want to do that
They
stuff.
always say that the audience doesn't change, but you do. Like
Yes.
you age, the audience doesn't, right? So the audience for comedy clubs, for anything entertainment generally, is the 20-somethings because they're the ones who can go out.
And
right?
I totally disagree with everything you people are saying. Like, I really do, because
No, I'm saying that's what the audience
no.
is. I'm not saying.
No,
I
I
think the
love the
audience is
audience,
35.
and I don't care what the audience
What
is.
I'm saying is that the audience is a specific, whether you appeal to them or not is beside the issue. The issue is that the age of the audience doesn't change that much unless you're attracting your own audience,
Right.
which is what we're all trying to do.
Right.
I don't know. Like, I find like a lot of older people are going to comedy clubs only because everyone else is watching it on YouTube. You know,
Yeah, they don't know how.
and we don't know how.
They don't have kids to
good
show
No,
them how
but
to watch it
also
for free.
I also recently did a show at Trent University for 18 to 24
Well, you're
year olds.
transcendent.
I'm not
for
saying that you
God's sake.
can't do it.
Yeah.
I'm saying that that's the audience.
But
Whether
who
you
gives
can.
a shit what the audience is, as long as you're making
Who
them
gives
laugh?
a shit what the audience? Because
As long as you're connecting with
This
them.
is the
I'm not.
angriest.
I've never looked at an audience and said, "Oh, what age are they tonight?"
Well,
I've
I
just
guess-
gotten
No,
up.
I'm
I'll tell you what,
I'm not
though,
saying
I'll tell
that
you what,
either.
That makes
I'm
you
saying
the exception. That makes you the exception to the rule, because I do think about it. I'm only 43, and I think about it every single night when I go out there. I go, and especially if it's not a comedy club, especially if it's a corporate gig, or if I get hired for some kind of a
Right.
private gig, or maybe I take that rare college show, which I don't actually like to do anymore. I always think about that audience. If it's a Wednesday night at a comedy club and the ticket price is half what it is on a Friday,
Right.
I go, younger crowd, it's going to be a different kind of material for me.
I'm not saying you can't do it, and I'm not saying that there's not an audience for it. All I'm saying is it's maybe my self-consciousness. But I did a gig recently, and I walked out, and I look at the crowd, and I felt like I have to say, I know what you're thinking. One of my parents' friends is here. It's like,
Right.
I'm the same age as their moms and dads.
I'm
Yeah,
not saying you
what-
can't find a way to connect with them.
No, I know.
Which
I'm-
you just did.
What I'm saying though is, for me, and I'm just thinking this what we were talking about is
I think as an audience person, just as an audience in general, you want to see someone on stage in any entertainment form who is plus or minus 10 years your age, just in general, right? Unless
'Cause you relate to them.
unless they're famous, and you're seeing them for the benefit of it's a nostalgia thing.
Sure.
I think if you're going to see entertainment of any kind, music, comedy, whatever, you want them generally in your age comfort range. Everybody
Let's see what
does.
Grandpa MacDonald has to say. What do you think, sir? You've been doing this man and boy for
Yeah.
75.
I find it amusing that sometimes when I play to a younger crowd and I do well, and then some guy booking the show would go, "They actually liked you."
Thanks.
Yeah. I find with any audience, if you're honest, then there's no problem
Thank
with the
you.
age.
I agree.
As long as because I remember when
Well,
I
I'm
was
not disagreeing with that.
when I was growing up watching Ed Sullivan, there were guys like Jack Carter, who was like a Borscht Belt comedian.
That's right.
And he was on stage. You know, I was like 9 years old watching this guy, and he was like Mick Jagger with the lips and the taking the marijuana. Even then, I knew he was full of shit. You know what I mean? Like there was, you know what I mean? So there's certain people that like hit it. Like on Just for Laughs one year, Milton Berle was on. You know, he was doing really well, but then he hit this Polak joke, and everybody just went, he's old. You know, he doesn't know better.
Because it seemed dated?
Yeah.
Well, it's not, politically correct, and also that, but George Burns had no problem entertaining a multiple,
Carlin had no
diverse
problem.
crowd. You know what I mean? So if you're honest and you're funny, that's half the battle.
Yeah.
I mean, there is something to be said about that. Now, I have the number here for you. The median age of a comedy club audience member is 34. That's the median age of a comedy
Right.
club member. Of course, there are some people that are, younger than that or older than that, but that's around the median age. And I find that you and I are in the sweet spot. You and I are in the sweet spot right now because the younger audiences can still appeal to us without thinking of us as being too old, and the older audiences can look at us and not see us as young comics, right? Whether we feel it or not, right? So we're in that kind of sweet spot. Don't get me wrong, me more than you, because women are held to a different standard, and I totally do believe that, right? When it comes to the clubs, right? But there is something to be said about your relatability. I think does change as you age.
I think so, for sure.
And so the irony is in radio, it's the opposite. The sweet spot for radio is 35, 65 now. Anyone 35 and under, they're not listening to radio in the way they used to when we were that age. It used to be where we got entertainment, where we got music from. You know, I have an 18 and a 22-year-old, and they're not getting their music from top 40 anymore. What does well in radio, the demographic is talk radio and older demographic and female-oriented. Like,
Well, I just find it interesting because I do a lot of work in Europe, and I was in Scandinavia. I was actually in Stockholm, and I was doing this small bar, and it was all 20-year-olds. And I got up to do my comedy, and everyone is speaking. It wasn't an English-speaking club. They were all speaking whatever they speak.
Stockholmish.
That's great.
I can see why you related right away.
But it was interesting because I thought it must be so funny for them because all of a sudden,
Here's a brunette.
No, it's their mom getting up on stage being filthy.
Right.
I was filthy,
Dirty
and I
mom.
thought it's almost my comedy's almost funnier the older I'm getting
Right.
from their perspective.
great.
Like and you know what? I'm not fucking done. And when I'm done, I haven't written my best joke. I don't feel like I still do like 2 or 3 open mics a week. I am just not fucking done.
Yeah.
And no fucking man is gonna fucking tell me that I'm too old to do this. And they try to.
How do you say fucking in
all
Stockholm?
the time.
They won't,
Fucking.
they won't tell you, they just won't hire you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've had my busiest fall ever, Glenn, so I think I'm pretty good.
There you go.
Let me say this. It's
fall.
everything kind of
Just the fall, though.
Just the fall.
everything ebbs
Some are
and
no good.
Winter.
everything ebbs and flows, right?
Yeah.
Everything. It's interesting. Your workable years and your non-workable years. I started stand-up comedy at 18 years old, and I remember that I had to wait until I was in my early 20s to actually get any work, despite the fact that I was doing open mics, because the bookers felt I was too young to have anything to say,
Right.
whether audiences laughed at me or not. And in my early 20s, even when I was working, I struggled with a lot of audiences because I couldn't relate to that 35-year-old that was the average audience member. The sweetest moment was when I hit 30 to 36 or whatever, because now I was that median age of the average audience member. Young people still liked me. I could still do colleges. The average comedy club goer was my age. They
Right.
adored it. Older audiences were fine with it. And
Yeah.
so it's interesting that in your 20s, it doesn't matter how hilarious you are, you can still struggle because you're too young to really work the club circuit, to work the clubs, right? Your 30s, it's perfect. And then all of a sudden it becomes, man, even if you've been doing this for 20 years, now you start to have that fear of, am I aging out of this?
But isn't it interesting that stand-up is one of the few art forms where older comedians still pump out fresh material that's relevant? I mean, the Jerry Seinfelds and the older guys. Whereas in other art forms, like, I I like Paul McCartney, but he hasn't written a decent song since 1976. Whereas, okay.
Ebony
I'm
and
sorry.
Ivory was
I'm
1982.
sorry. I know. I saw your thing about Wonderful Christmas Time is making them $400,000. I know you love Christmas. But it's true that older, it's stand-up is one of those few art forms where you are continuing to be in your sweet spot no matter what age you
I've
are.
opened for Mike. I've hosted for Mike. I've opened for Glenn. I've hosted for Glenn. They're great comics, and I've never thought of, oh, they're too old. I like the fact that Glenn makes fun of his age, like with your roller skating joke or like whatever.
That's 20 years old.
See, there you go. That's the last time
old
I opened
thing.
for you.
The
So
very
old, they
first.
used to
I
call
do
them
need to
roller
ask.
skates.
Actually,
What are
actually,
roller skates?
I am older than my. I was always kind of older than my time anyway, because I remember
Yeah.
the first joke I did about being old, and I did it at 25. When on my 25th birthday, the joke was, "Yeah, I just turned 25, and I'm kind of worried about it because I saw a station wagon the other day, and I kind of liked it. 25, I was feeling old. So imagine how old I'm feeling now.
No
Well,
kidding.
I want to say this, and this isn't to blow smoke up anyone's ass, okay? But you talk about you opened for Mike, and what a stellar comic, and you opened for Glenn, and what a stellar comic. But both of the gentlemen we're talking about have a reputation of being, you know, very known, you know, legends in Canadian comedy, especially, right? Now, would this be the same thing you could say about a comedian who is 63 years old, who never made it to their level, who's just been working in the clubs all those years?
Like you,
and there are guys like that.
That's what I'm saying. We all know the guys, the career guys.
Guys working cruise ships, a lot of
Yes.
them. you know,
Right.
I mean,
But people that have been career comedians who have been there forever, who, I mean, Glenn, I mean, last time I saw you live, you had sold out a small theater. You know, Mike, you've done more TV appearances than everybody in this room. So we're talking about you two are on a different level than, say, a 64-year-old comic who's been drudging away trying to get gigs at Uncle Knucklefucker's Yuck Yuck Hut. For
I
the
love that
past-
room. That is a great room. Do you remember a comic? I know these guys do, but I came to Toronto back in the mid-'80s, and there was this guy named Gary David.
Yes.
Great guy.
Yes.
With the one tooth.
Yes.
And when we were in our 20s and late 20s.
Before
Yes.
my time.
But we were in our mid-20s and late 20s, and this Gary David guy would have
He
been.
started at
80s.
50.
But when we
He
met
started
him,
at 50.
So when we met him in our 20s, he would have been 55, 60.
Yeah.
With the cigarette mustache.
Yeah.
And we'd go up and do his act. And I remember looking at him thinking, I don't know if I want to be doing it when I'm
I
that age.
thought
And now-
exactly that.
And now
I
we're
thought
his
exactly
age.
that.
We're old, probably older than he was. You remember him?
If I didn't,
yeah.
if I didn't,
it's very funny.
if I was
Very
the type
funny.
to steal lines, I'd be stealing this one. This was his opening line, and I always thought it was the best. He'd come out and he'd go, "I know what you're
Thinking.
thinking. Oh, fuck, he's old."
I know what you're thinking. All of us would be like, fucking Gary, man.
It's like there's always going to be room for the cool grandpa, the
Yeah.
cool grandma, the cool aunt, the cool.
Well, look at
uncle.
Rodney. Rodney
The-
came back
or
in
the
his
dirty.
late 40s.
The
Yeah.
dirty ant. The
Yeah.
dirty.
Louis
Okay, now here's
Black.
where
Look
you're,
at Lewis Black.
now here's where you're actually wrong. Rodney Dangerfield did not come on board when he was in his 40s. He came on well into his 50s.
Right.
That's
but
true.
A little
And
older.
well, let me say, but that is something, and I think every comedian, even me at 43, every comedian goes, "Oh my God, I hope to have Rodney Dangerfield's career." I think he's actually
Right.
the barometer for
Right.
anyone when they start
my
worrying
mother
about their
actually-
age.
My mother actually cursed me at one point because I was saying I haven't done this and I haven't done that. Well, Rodney Dangerfield wasn't famous till he was 50, and I'm like, well, I'm past 50 now.
Mid 50s, probably.
Mid-50s.
I always use
But
Ken-
see, he
I always use
started.
the Colonel.
He
didn't-
started and then he left it, though, didn't he?
Yeah.
He
Yeah,
started,
he started.
and then he left
well,
it for
I mean,
a while and came
yes,
back
but
to
you're
it,
talking
right?
about somebody, but he didn't have any actual fame,
No,
right? You're talking
no.
about somebody who worked,
Yes.
went away,
Well, he
sold
had a little
aluminum,
bit of fame.
sold aluminum siding, and then came back in his 50s.
But to
Right.
Kate's point, Lewis Black is a great example of somebody that has been, he's like Mike and Glenn. He's well known and continues
Yes.
to be relevant, but he had a lot of sort of, he's not a guy that just started out
He
at
was a
55.
playwright.
He was
well,
a playwright, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But,
But I mean, but that's deep down. That's what we all hope for. We all hope for that career of the person who, even if you're a young comic, you hope for the career of the comic that peaks older because you go,
Right.
well, that gives me time.
Right.
You know, whether it's Rodney Dangerfield or it's Lewis Black or what have you.
But if you're famous, you can do comedy forever because you will have your audience.
right.
Yeah.
But if you're not, or
But
if
I'm
you're just
talking
on
about
the
those
cusp
that-
of that,
I'm talking about those who come of fame
late in the game.
Well, there aren't
Late
that
in the-
many.
But I
though.
don't think that happens so much anymore.
No?
Because it's just
We're
not the
ageist?
same. It's not the
Maybe.
same
But I
world
think-
anymore.
But I think we are because I look at. I'm such a big fan. I'm such a big fan of classic comedy, and by that I mean I love listening to classic radio shows, Jack Benny, and Burns and Allen and Fibber, McGee and Molly, and I go back to all that. And these characters, these people that they portrayed, no matter what age they were kind of always 45, 50. They were always kind of that age. They were middle age, right?
Right.
There was a time when comedy was the thing of middle age.
Right.
Well,
know,
if we did
and-
this in Shakespearean time, middle age would have been 8. So
That's right. We'd all be dead. But funny, I love those comics. Jack Benny, George Burns, and when I
Jack
was
Benny
a
was
kid-
always
No, I
39
was gonna say,
supposedly, but he was always 48.
But when we were kids,
kind of, right?
when we were 10 or 12, those guys in their 40s seemed like they were in their 60s.
Yeah.
We're
Yes,
all older
yes,
than
yes,
those
yes.
guys now.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask Mike, we have children, you've got a kid, you've got children. I talk about them in my act, but do you have kids yet?
No.
What do you, so is
None
your,
that I know of.
so,
Waka
I didn't think you
waka.
did. So has your act changed as you've
I'm
gotten
not the
older?
father.
Not really.
Because I've watched you, I say no Mike, I've seen Mike for the first time in 1980. He was the
He-
first guy I ever saw do an hour in a room and rock it. And I always was so impressed by both of these two. How much-
Hasn't written a joke
But
since
you
then.
know what?
Yeah, no, believe me, that's the opposite. So what are you writing now?
Well, it's,
Besides the fact you almost died.
I always
That old
yeah,
thing.
I always feel like I play the cards that I've been dealt. So and the old adage of talk about what you know. So I talk about addiction, transplants. I talk about being bipolar, manic depressive, and I just talk about what's interests me in life right
Does
now.
age get involved in that at all?
I don't do a lot of I'm old jokes.
Well, because
That's
so-
surprising to me because at 43, I'm already doing that. I'm already doing
Well, you have a
jokes
new
about
kid.
being middle-aged.
But I remember a lot of what
Doing that.
a lot of the stuff in Mike's act was about your dad. And now you're the age your dad was when you were portraying him in your act.
Yeah.
Yeah, the problem was my dad died a few years ago, and when my dad died, my incentive to do anything about my dad just went away.
It's funny because my dad died,
And
I got
it-
5 new
yeah,
minutes. That's not even lying.
It might come
Really?
back. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it might come back in a few years, but right now, I
You're not ready.
I don't want to talk about
You're not
it
ready.
for a while.
Well, let me ask you
don't,
this.
I don't talk about my family at all.
No,
Like, I
no.
mentioned
In
it
fact, most
barely.
people I would say that see your act don't even know anything that you have
I
a
have
family.
a family.
No, it's
But
true.
that's the thing, though, because I'm not a person. I don't relate personal stories. I'm an observationalist.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at. I'm look from the outside.
It's the
kinda
most
thing.
interesting thing because I was always an observational comedian, always, and something happened about, and I started later than all of my friends. I didn't get married until I was in my late 30s. Didn't have a kid until I was 40, and yet, now all of my material is about being married, having a kid,
Right.
and being middle-aged.
Right.
When
But it goes back
I
to
was
what Mike
never
was saying.
that
That's
comedian.
honest. That's what's happening
Yeah.
to you now.
But
you
I was
are-
never
you-
that comedian.
You are a more personal, relatable type. You know what I mean? That
I
is-
am
that
now.
is- no, but I saw you earlier on, and
Yeah.
I think that you've always had that sort of relatability and personal
Right.
angle type thing. Whereas
but
I'm
why-
saying that I just don't. So I don't.
Well, I've noticed about you, age isn't a real big part of your act. With you, it's not at all, but is that on purpose, or do you just not think about it?
I really don't think about it much. I mean, I look at my life as far as my experiences, but I don't relegate them to this happened here and this happened. You know what I mean?
But also, you don't
Is
want
that a-
you don't want to go down a beaten path either, right? Like I try to find
Right.
new paths.
Right.
I don't want to say I probably could sit down and write 20 jokes about being old anytime I wanted to, but it doesn't.
Can't remember.
I can't remember. It doesn't.
But
That's the ADD. That's
But,
a,
but now with Mike, I have to wonder, I look at me and I go, so much of my material being about being middle-aged or getting older, I think comes out of the fact that I don't feel it, right?
Right.
Yeah,
I woke
exactly.
up and I went, oh my God, I'm middle-aged, but middle age isn't supposed to look this good. And it's not supposed to.
Wow. There you go.
That is so
That's
boring.
why. That is.
It's the only reason there are mirrors in clubs.
That's
too.
hysterical.
I'm surprised we can fit him into the
You
studio.
just feel that whole.
shouldn't there be an
thing
extra
in the
monitor
room.
here
Would
just
you
so,
know what,
so
Ward?
Ward can
But
look
it's
at
like-
himself?
but I
all the
mean,
shows?
but think
Even
about
the
it.
people working on a show all look down.
So I haven't.
Don't bullshit
Kiss
me.
myself.
Do not bullshit me.
This guy.
When you were 20 years old, when you were 18 years old, and you saw a photo of somebody 45,
Did they
it
look like
look like
you?
what you thought 45 looked like?
Yeah, but look at somebody from the Middle Ages who's 20 and they look like they're
Ward, I don't
60,
know how many
right?
minutes are left, but we're never leaving that alone. So just get used to it. That's fucking hysterical.
That's just a function of better vitamins. And
exact
people
And you
allegedly
tell who the
looking after
American in the room
themselves.
is.
But going to that, my ego aside, you nearly died. You nearly died. You had a liver transplant. You have a new lease on life. So maybe your humor isn't about feeling old because you feel renewed. Is that possible? Is it possible?
There's a
All
second
new
chance.
parts.
Some
It's
nice
more important.
Second
to
chance
know
that I've
nice
had.
parts.
So, yeah.
Is that possible? That's it?
Yeah, certainly, but it's a
you had
mind.
my liver, you'd feel old.
It's a mindset. I mean, I still play my music loud. You know, I still, you know, and I'm not one of those guys that thinks, you know, I have a lot of friends my age that go, well, there hasn't been any good music since Nirvana. No, once I got that Shazam app, it was not hard to keep up with stuff that I like that's current. So in my playlist, it's half old and half brand new. So there's no,
See, I think I've been
there's
lucky
no
because
old mentality I've
my
developed.
job has been for a
Yeah.
long time being current, being around people that are talking about current events, new music, new movies, new comedians.
Well,
and so
and working in radio, you probably have to do that more than comedians do because it changes day by day as opposed to gig by gig.
And so I feel I don't feel that age either, mainly because I'm forced to, unlike a lot of 56-year-olds, to be current and to be involved in something in it. And also the way I've always been as a broadcaster informs how I do stand-up because I have to, when you do 2 hours or 3 hours a day, all you can be is yourself. So my stand-up's
Yeah.
like that. All I can do on stage
Right.
is similar to what I do on the radio. It's
He
just,
does 2 or 3 hours there too.
Wish,
when he's
but-
hosting.
Thank you, Glenn. I did a little longer one time.
And he's never
And
let
me
it
forget.
go.
You know what he said? He reminded me. He did on his second encore. I brought him back, ladies and gentlemen, Glenn, and I said, I gotta go.
He said, I gotta
literally
go.
left.
He brings me out,
It
and
was
then
too
he
late
leaves.
because I had to get up the next morning. I
So-
go, I gotta leave.
Oh, it's okay. I'll just
See,
close.
the radio guys are the worst.
I'll just
'cause
close this.
They want the gig. They want to be there at night, but they're like,
No.
I got to be up early. You can
No.
close the show without
Yeah.
me, right? I
That's
got
exactly what we did.
Exactly.
My closer right now is I have a new
Mike
closer,
MacDonald.
and it's all about the only thing that ages me are my kids.
Yeah,
I don't feel older, but my kids keep getting older. I'm
Could
not
you
gonna say
imagine
the
writing
joke,
that
but
20 years
yeah.
ago, though?
yeah.
Well, when
No, but I'm saying when
of
you
course
when you're
not.
23, you look at a 43-year-old who's got kids, you think, oh, the typical talking about their kids, but then you get kids, and that's what you talk about.
No. Well, yeah, but I mean, the relevant is the only thing that I don't feel older. The only thing that's getting older in my life are my children.
The thing I've said on stage, and I think it's funny because it's true.
Did you
and I
tell
mean
people
it.
on stage how good looking you are? 'Cause
Ah.
that kills.
Yes, he does.
I don't need to tell them. They see
It's
this.
mandatory in the intro.
Holy
Please
shit,
welcome
we're
the very handsome.
Yeah, very beautiful. You can't believe he's only 43. I know you think he looks younger. Keep
Much,
going.
much younger.
I will say though that having a 15-year-old daughter, keeps me plugged
Yeah.
into that
Sure.
world
Yeah.
that I wouldn't give a shit about otherwise.
Right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know about Snapchat and all
Yeah.
these other things that I can't even remember right now. I wouldn't know that every second thing I say triggers her.
Well, I say this,
Right.
we're all actually very lucky too, because there was a time when an older generation couldn't understand what a younger generation was going through
Right.
because they didn't have the communications, right? With the internet being what it is, we can learn what the younger generation is doing because
No,
we
you
can easily
can't.
point, click, and read about
You
it.
can read about it, you can watch it, but you
Come
can't
on,
understand.
but we were way
you can't
worse. I
understand
look at my
it.
children and I'm like, you're fucking pussies.
You can't
compared to us.
understand it. You can
Like,
look at it. You can observe
seriously,
it.
kids, they know everything, but they've experienced nothing.
Yeah, but you were the same way.
No,
Yeah,
I
you
disagree.
were. You just forget.
You disagree?
You forget.
totally
How do you, okay.
I will
that's-
show you a
That's
Snapchat
interesting
that
you say that.
proves.
Wait, that's interesting you say that. How do you feel that's not true? Because I actually agree with Glenn on that. How do you
What,
feel that
Snapchat?
No,
No,
how
that
do
you
you
weren't
how
the
do you
same
think
way.
that kids today are pussies but you weren't? Because I actually
Because I
think
know
Glenn-
what I did and I know what our kids are doing, and I'm like,
Yeah, but then the generation before us went to war.
Yeah.
yeah,
Right? So we were pussies to
absolutely.
them.
Every
Absolutely.
generation thinks
Wait to
they
see
invented.
the next pussified
everything.
generation that's coming.
I don't
out.
know.
yeah.
I don't know.
I don't think our kids have really experienced a lot. I think they know a lot. I don't think they've experienced a lot.
I
it
think Mike
depends on
thinks
what
they
that
show-
experience is. It depends on what that experience is.
yeah, but you have a
because-
3-year-old.
Yeah, well, I don't mean even that. I mean, I look at who I was sexually as an 18-year-old.
Oh God, do we have to
Here
hear
we
about
go
that
again.
now? How
Oh,
beautiful
my God,
you are
just
when you
mirrors
make love.
everywhere.
Exactly. Is this what's next? You should see me make love. I'm beautiful.
But I think you're
Sorry. Please
I think,
continue.
I know
This
I
show
know
is
my
taking a
perspective.
left
That wasn't
turn.
where I was going, but you have
Yeah,
a
really.
point.
But I know my younger self.
No, but no,
looked at
serious-
older comics and went, man, that guy's old, and he wasn't that. You know,
Yeah.
these guys wouldn't be that old.
Yeah.
They'd be like younger than the
Yeah.
age I
But
am
think
now.
think
and
about,
it'd be like, here's
think
an
about
old
how,
guy on stage.
Think about who we were when we were 18. When I was 18, the idea of oral sex was this foreign thing that you were like, oh my God, I hope one day I can bribe a woman into doing this. And now 18-year-olds are playing video games while their girlfriends are blowing them, going, why do you do this all the time? You're distracting me.
Can't wait for your
And it's-
3-year-old to watch this.
They
He's like,
have-
Daddy, what? Excuse me?
There are so many ways. There are so many ways that our the next generation is far more advanced than we are.
In
Where'd
some
you
ways.
grow up?
In some
Atlanta,
ways.
Georgia.
I find the main
yeah.
thing with my parents' generation, you know, like before my father died, he was at a point where he didn't want to learn a bunch of new stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas I mean, I've like, for example, my viewing habits have totally changed. I used in the 90s it was how big can I buy the TV.
Yeah.
Now I'm sitting in the bathroom watching a movie on my phone. I've totally adapted, going, yeah, this is great. You know.
They say 35. 35 is the age when you stop looking for new music and you just go back to the music that you grew up with, and that's all you listen to.
I
is
love
all the
Steve
stuff.
Martin's joke. What was the joke about? You reach a certain age, is something new.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
But they say at 35 is when you stop, is the average person stops trying to find new music and they just go with what they've known.
I feel sorry
still
for
listen.
them.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah,
Because there's
listen
some
to
really
new
good
music.
music out there now.
I've
There
always
really
heard
is.
someone
But there's
don't
more
wanna hear-
bad music out there because everybody puts out everything.
Well,
You know
I
what I
mean,
mean? So you
But
gotta
it's not
weed through
curated
it.
the same way. It
you
used
have,
to
you
be-
have so many choices
It,
now.
it used to be curated in some very specific silos. There was
Right.
AM, there was FM, and that's it. The problem with it is now is, as
So
Mike
many
said,
choices.
you can Shazam something in a department store, and the next thing you can know, you download it, you buy it. It's curated by everyone now. I mean, one of the greatest disruptive phrases of the last 20 years is the YouTube tagline, broadcast yourself. You know, when we were all starting off, you know, you'd get a camera the size of a bus to tape your act, and now everyone's putting their phone on the edge of a stool.
Well, and
And
I
it's
thought about
curated
that.
by everyone.
My very first demo tape was done at the Punchline in Atlanta, Georgia.
Why his girlfriend blew him and he was playing a video game. Come on, that's a callback.
We were all going.
My
well, did
point
they-
is I didn't
I was
get
gonna- Did they think
blowjobs.
you were pretty then
I
too?
didn't get them then, and
That's-
kids get them today. That was my point.
These kids and their blowjobs.
These kids and their blowjobs,
And they're pretty.
and they're with their body fat, nothing.
You were saying about taping.
My
something.
first. Thank you, Howard.
Thank you. I'm just
I need
keeping
you.
it-
You should
I
be
know.
my sidekick always.
Thanks.
My
That's
first.
where I'm headed.
my
The
first-
old
I'm with this
sidekick.
guy.
My first demo tape was at the Punchline in Atlanta, Georgia. I was 22 years old. Back when, if you wanted to get work as a comedian, you had to have a professional videotape demo done that was done by a club that had a videotaping system.
That's right.
Yeah.
And now you can get a demo tape done with your phone that looks better than my first professional
Right.
demo that I had done when
Yeah.
I was 22
Hey,
years
Ward, when
old.
we had our demos tapes, the guy was doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just making that
Yeah,
noise
just
with his
making that
mouth.
noise.
Yeah.
He wasn't even taping. That guy was, it was like a courtroom sketch, but he was going,
And he said, hey, Howard,
Hey,
I got a good
buddy.
idea for you. You're
Hey,
going to like
Kate.
this.
Yeah.
It's a demo tape. You're going to love it. You're going to work
we're gonna
all
bring
over the
Ward on. He's
place.
going to do some of his pretty blowjob humor. Don't you see?
These kids today with their blowjobs and their
And their
juice
good head.
and their Atari 2600. I said earlier, though, and I mean this,
This is the
we're-
longest show in the history.
we're aging. I'm going to take your shoe and I'm going to throw it.
Okay.
I've done it before.
I'm getting tired. Mike's falling
I
asleep.
peaked 2 hours ago.
We should have done this at 4:30 in the
Yeah,
afternoon.
really.
The
Seriously.
blue plate special.
sorry.
Right after
No, we
our
gotta-
nap.
People don't know watching this, but it's almost midnight where we're
Believe
taping
you.
this.
There's two things that are
I
true.
didn't nap. I didn't nap before.
I had to, I
Plus,
did
you're
too.
younger than everybody here.
Leave the ageism show to the very last.
Yeah, really.
That's right.
Way late at
You should have done
night.
this at noon.
They're not trying to appeal to the old people anymore.
But there is something to be said about we do definitely age differently. Okay, you are now what 58, 59.
We've been aging during the 56.
56 exactly.
Come
Shit.
on.
So
You're
you
like
look good.
64,
You look good.
Thanks.
63.
That's all that matters.
Thanks. I was
So-
56 when the show started.
But let's be honest, and I said that earlier, but I mean it. If you look at photos of what people at 45 looked like,
Yeah.
I remember when I was a child, someone would turn 40 and they put the black balloons on the mailbox and over the hill and oh my God, and you would see photos of people. I saw a photo of Babyface Nelson, who probably died before he was 30, and he looked 50 if he was a day.
Oh, yeah.
People
That's right.
age differently, and that's why I say it's now aging it's more of a on the inside thing. You know, it's on the outside it still looks good. I think it's on the inside.
There's a
you
lot
age
less
faster.
soot in the atmosphere.
Well, and back to what Kay
that
was
what it
saying.
is?
Like, I'm just bringing it back to the beginning where you're saying, you know, if you're
Look at
you're
you.
funny and you're relevant and you have a voice that is relatable to a lot of
I will
different
say,
people.
right, I will
Let
say-
me just finish that. Then why can't you be your age,
Yeah.
doing stand-up for 23-year-olds and 63-year-olds?
Absolutely.
Because I have received letters
Yep.
that say
Letters.
you are too old to appeal to our core demographic
Yeah.
from clubs.
Well,
I
and
haven't.
that is what we're getting to here. Okay, that's what we're getting to here. I believe that everyone in this room,
Which I think is illegal.
I
Yeah.
do,
And mean,
but I believe
Glenn.
everyone in this room
But I get it.
can entertain people of all ages, depending on the audience. I do believe that. I've seen each of you perform, and I do believe you each have a universal act. But that doesn't mean that this industry agrees with us.
Right.
No.
And I've seen that in the fact that at 43, I've already watched myself age out of the college market, where I've gone, I can't relate to these audiences like I used to, and I've
You'll
had
trigger them.
What?
You'll trigger them.
You think so?
I'm just saying that's the thing on campus now is that everything is a trigger or
Ah.
a trigger warning. So that, I'm just saying that's why you can't relate to. You will trigger them as well.
Well, I mean, I've just noticed that because my act has become so personal about growing older, about having children, about being married, it's just an act that doesn't relate to people that are 20 years old
And it's kind of the
anymore.
point I was making.
I'm not
that-
saying they won't ever find it funny. It doesn't relate to them.
But it's kind of the point I was making. If I got a job offer now in radio to go work at an 18 to 24-year-old radio station, yeah, I could probably pull it off.
Buzz FM.
Exactly. I could probably pull it off, but I don't know that I'd want to. And it's kind of what I was sort of saying at the beginning. Like, I know I could go and make 23-year-olds laugh. I'm not sure I want to do that anymore.
But
As
now
much-
you do talk radio essentially. You
yeah,
don't
but
do
our demo's a little bit older than that.
Yeah, but I got you. But you do talk radio. There's no music played, right?
No.
If you were doing music again, it would be adult contemporary. That's where you'd be
Absolutely.
placed,
Yep.
right?
Or even the last music station I worked at was like a greatest hits sort of, you know, of the 80s, 90s, and today. And it was,
Blended
well, yeah, it was all that stuff. And for everything from Nirvana to, you know, the
Juice Newton.
No Doubt. But my point just is that
Everything that
I'm
fits in
more
our 500 song playlist.
Right, and I'll say this, for me personally, I'm just more comfortable when I do my act or go out to a corporate event when they're a little bit older, because then I feel like
Yeah.
I'm talking
I'm
to
always
people.
relieved to walk in and see
that's
some,
all.
some. Everyone wants to see, as
And
I
there's
said,
nothing wrong
people
with that.
roughly their age. It's just a comfort thing. It doesn't matter if you're having dinner or if you're entertaining or whatever you're doing. It's just more important.
Or if
when
you're going to the
entertaining.
salon, whatever it is you do in between these
And
appearances.
white.
Yeah. Oh,
Thank you. Yeah,
That's another show.
That's another show.
You know what? And it's
I never looked at someone and thought, oh, because of your age, I can't relate.
That's right.
no,
No.
no.
I've never gone to.
You know, for all of our talk about Rodney Dangerfield or whatever, you know, George Burns, we look at someone who was doing comedy up till the day he died at the age of 100. People forget that the man had a downfall and was unseen for almost 2 decades because of his age. It was because of the Sunshine Boys
Right.
doing this movie in the 70s. He had a comeback and then managed to ride that through
But
the rest
doesn't
of his
fame
life.
sort of trump? I don't know. I can't.
Yeah, but
can
we're
you
in
even use
Canada,
that?
we're not
but
really
doesn't it
talking about
trump
fame.
everything?
it does.
If-
That's what I said at the beginning. If
Yeah.
you're famous, you can do comedy.
Seinfeld goes out 3 weekends a month because he still loves doing it and he's famous. If he was 40 years old, I don't know that, you know, like
If he wasn't famous,
if he wasn't famous, he would be doing.
It would be a difficult thing for him.
Right.
So if he was
I agree.
Canadian.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, he does comedians in cars, and we should do like Canadians in cars
Canoes.
getting Tims or something.
But it's
Canadians
funny.
in
That's a
canoes.
really good point.
Canadians
Fame,
in canoes
fame is what fame is what
tipped.
changes it. Now,
My daughter hates that joke. I just keep saying it. Canadians in cars getting. I don't know.
Can we name a comedian in the past 20 years? Other than, I mean, Louis Black would be probably the closest, and that's on the cusp.
Who's come out late?
That's on the that's come out late. Who's come out late?
Well, Louis was late. He was
Louis
in his
C.K.?
40s.
He's still
42.
But he's been
Yeah,
around.
but-
He's been around a
He'd already-
long time.
I-
though.
He had already
know
won.
he
He'd
has,
already
but
won
we're
an
talking
Emmy.
about fame.
He'd already
Yeah.
won an Emmy at that point. He was industry
As a
known.
writer,
Yeah.
yes.
But he was
Yeah.
industry
Yes.
known at
Yeah.
that point.
Whereas someone to just walk into the business.
Someone
would be
to
a
someone to
very-
break out post 45.
But is that
Yeah.
an age thing, or is that just, like, it's not? I'm sure there could be somebody, but not many people decide at
think-
45
I
go,
think it's
you
a
know
bit-
what,
bit
I've had
of
enough
both.
of accounting. I think I'm going to go and get
I'm
some
getting into
spots.
I'm
But
getting
that
into
doesn't
accounting.
matter.
I'm just gonna get
But it
into
doesn't.
accounting.
No, it doesn't matter if they get into it at 45. When you get discovered, might as well be when you got into it. You could be doing comedy. Rodney Dangerfield was doing it for 30 years. He wasn't discovered till he was in his 50s.
Right.
So as far as the world is concerned, he started doing it in his 50s.
Right, exactly.
Right? So, I mean, that's really.
Every year, for example, like shows like America's Got Talent. Last year, I had an older woman, and
Yep.
she was funny. The first 2 times,
Grandma
yep,
Lee.
she earned her place, but
Yeah.
the third one, she tanked.
Right.
And it was over because she wasn't funny. It wasn't anything to do
Are we
with
talking
it.
about Grandma Lee? Are we talking
If she would have been funnier, she would have stayed in, but she tanked
Right.
on the third one, and it was over. But
That's also an interesting thing too. There's something to be said about it. It's almost like with comedy, in your 20s, no one respects you. You got to really earn your dues. In your 30s, you're prime. That's it. That's the place to be. As you get older, people kind of ignore you. Then you reach like 70, and then people cheer you on, and they go,
Yes.
"Bring on the old
Right.
people jokes,
Yeah.
man!" It's almost
Absolutely.
like we're all waiting to reach
Yeah, they're
our
just
70s. Where you
impressed
go,
you're still alive
"I'm just
at that
waiting for the
point."
grandpa jokes for me
Yeah.
to make a comeback," right? Because there's a lot of that on the road. There's a lot of the old grandma, dirty grandpa, acts out there that
I'm
are,
just waiting for the Jews to break into this business, because one day we'll get our
Final.
shot. We'll get our shot. Why not? Huh? There's no old Jews in this business. Come on.
But you know
Where's
what? It's
the
funny. You
Jews?
didn't mean to do it,
Huh?
Howard. You didn't mean to do it, Howard. But you brought us back to something I said earlier.
Oh, I did.
And that is that
The
there was
Jews.
there was
The
a
Jews.
time when you didn't break into comedy if you were young.
That's
so
true.
if you look at the
Yeah.
Borscht Belt comedians, it's like you
Yeah.
didn't even debut until you were in your 40s.
right.
Yeah. Unless your last name was Cohen.
In,
you can't
in,
get
in the early
Was
80s,
But
restricted.
the people you probably looked up to when you were a kid were probably comedians already in their 40s and older.
well, Pryor, Carlin, Cheech and Chong, I mean, they
But
weren't
prior to
weren't that old, much older.
You
Mike,
were,
prior
but
to
you
that,
were
it's
looking at
Alan
essentially
King.
your generation. That's
Right.
you're only a few years removed from that. I'm
Right.
talking about
Bob
you're
Hope.
talking about
Yeah.
10 years old.
Yeah. All the other older comedians, I never saw anything as age at all. I just saw things as funny or not.
Right.
I think
Thank
the ageism, ironically, was started with our generation when MTV was formed. MTV was the guiding point of them and us, old and young.
I've often said
It
that.
started right there.
You know, it's funny because comedy often mimics music. You know, and I've often talked about this where I said, look at the 70s before MTV came along, and musicians that are now revered, renowned,
Right.
would never have gotten
Wouldn't
a
have
record
got the
contract.
shot.
Right.
Meatloaf would have never gotten a
Never.
record
No, no,
contract
no way.
based
Yeah.
on being a 300-pound man.
Right.
You know, some of the singers from the 70s that are renowned, you go, these were some ugly fucking people. Right?
No, exactly. Well, again, everyone's ugly compared to you, but that's a different story.
Ah,
That's a different episode.
But Mike, what I want to say is
my
that
favorite
comics
show
the
ever.
comics I liked in the 60s, though, were all older guys. Myron Cohn, Alan King, Jack Carter. And
Well,
what
those
happened
guys, yeah.
was those guys were sort of the precursor to the Carlin and the Pryor, who, when they were first starting out, were just doing straight stand-up. It wasn't until the hippy-dippy, guy became the hippie
Right.
that there
Sure.
was that's when it changed, because prior to that it was old men, old Jewish guys
Right.
from the Borscht Belt, and those are the guys we'd see on Ed Sullivan, and you'd be like,
contemporary
content.
comedy.
That was who made me laugh to begin
Mort
with.
Phyllis
Saul.
Diller came along.
Before
Right?
what?
You take a
Until
Mort Saul.
Phyllis.
But let
Even,
me tell you,
even seeing Phyllis Diller for the first time,
Yeah.
she seemed old to me
Yeah.
when
Always.
I was a kid.
Phyllis Diller
Right.
was
Same with
always
Joan Rivers.
45.
Yeah.
Joan Rivers actually was different than Phyllis Diller. She
Yeah,
seemed
she
young.
was young at the beginning.
Yeah.
because she was. But all those old guys, on all the guys I mentioned, were all prior to Pryor and Carlin
Right.
changing.
I have a series of DVDs, the best of the Dean Martin variety show,
Oh.
right? And there's a classic set on there by this up-and-coming comic who does a 20-minute set, and it's Don Rickles.
Wow.
And Don Rickles probably is in his late 30s in this special, which is in the mid-60s.
And he's up and coming.
And he's up and coming.
That's right.
And he looks 46 if he's a
Exactly.
day. He's already mostly
Yeah.
bald. He's not fit. You know what I mean? And I look at that and I go, hilarious, because they not only give him a set on this Dean Martin show, which was considered at the time a
The
breakthrough
show.
set for him. It was
Right.
considered
Yeah.
a big deal. And he went on to do all these interviews about his breakthrough 20-minute, very politically incorrect set on the Dean Martin show, the variety show. And I look at that now and I go, wow, they promoted that as this new young and upcoming comic, and he was probably pushing 40
Yeah.
at the time he did
Right.
that special.
That's a baby for a comic.
Well, that's just it. It is,
Yeah.
and yet now we've reached this point. We're at a different point now because for the first time in my life, I mean, I've been studying comedy, not just, I mean, yes, I'm a comedian, but I've been studying comedy. I grew up as a child in the boom watching people like yourself doing comedy. I've studied it my whole life, and I go, this is the first time that I've noticed a boom of young comedians under
And
30.
they're great.
There was
Yeah.
always, yes, but there was always the occasional under 30 comic that broke through. Eddie Murphy was one of those. Damon Wayans was one of those. There were these people that did, but it was rare. And now it seems, if I were to make a list of comedians who have made it before 30, it's a long list now.
Yeah.
We're
Well,
in a really different time.
Just take a look at the Just for Laughs,
Variety.
Vancouver,
Yeah.
and Toronto, and their lineup is basically younger comics.
Always, yeah.
yeah.
And then I think we're.
But also, there's more comics.
Yeah.
There's way more comics, so you're going to get more younger ones. You're going to get more females, more minorities, whatever, because there's more comics.
There's
just
also more of an
everything.
avenue for them, just like
More
everything
avenues,
else.
that's
Ju-
right.
You know, just like Bo Burnham came from the internet. He did, again, broadcasting yourself. Theo Vaughn, John Mulaney. These guys are all under 30 years old, and it's almost like there's this renaissance of guys. Again, that our peer group. A lot of people our age don't know who those guys are. You know, I had a text on Saturday night from a buddy of mine. He said, I'm watching Netflix. You're always talking about comics. I said, Tom Segura, John Mulaney, Theo Vaughn. I gave him 5 or 6. He said, I never heard of any of these guys. Because unless you're into stand-up,
Right.
Yeah.
those aren't mainstream names, but they're big in our world. They are in mine. I just think it's an interesting time because there's so, as you say, so many guys, so many good guys, and, a lot of them
And
aren't
so
mainstream.
much shit.
But
Well,
yeah,
so
well,
much
yeah,
shit.
So wrapping up.
on Netflix, there's the good specials,
Yeah.
and there's a lot
Of
that
course.
fall flat.
And then
you know.
sometimes
That's a month at a
sometimes
comedy
they're
club. It's 3
foreigners.
weeks of brilliance and 1 week of shit.
Yeah.
So wrapping up, okay, as we all get older, and we're all going to get older,
Hopefully.
what is the future going to be? I mean, here's the good news, that there are more avenues for comedy now. There's Netflix, there's Amazon, there's so much streaming and everything like that. What is the future of comedy as we all get older? Do we all wind up in other places? Do we go into radio like you and I, or television or podcasting or whatever? Or are we going to be okay because the audience is getting older too?
The audience is not getting older. Unless you can find your audience, you have to deal with the audience until you are bringing in your audience, you have to deal with the audience that comes into the club or wherever you have been brought in to entertain them, corporate event, whatever. And they are not getting older. They are roughly the same age.
I'll say for me in my career, I've seen my audience go from, a lot of people to less people. I mean, when we worked on terrestrial radio, I had a huge audience. So I would say this. The audience that I've got as I've gotten older has gotten smaller but more loyal, more supportive. It's interesting that it's less people, but they're more. They found us, and maybe that's the future. Is that you're going to appeal to maybe smaller groups of people, but more sort of fanatic. More, they'll be Kate fans. That's what we've found.
That's what I want. Small groups of fanatics.
Yeah, well.
Hey, you know what?
You'll take
Don't
anybody.
discount it. Don't
Yeah.
discount it. Many a comedian has made a great career off that. What do you think, Mike?
I see it a lot as like, you know, for example, I want to make these parody movies, and my main concern is to see the comedy done properly, as opposed to I have to be in front of the camera. I don't have to be in front of the camera. I get my look at me when I'm on stage doing stand-up. But as far as writing and jokes like that, I'd be very happy to see my material coming out of somebody else's mouth properly.
All
That's
right,
great.
fair enough. And that says something, because I think one of the things one of the pitfalls of being a stand-up comic is our ego. It's our inability to
Right.
go, maybe now I step into a different role while
Right.
staying in the industry. Kate?
For me, it's all about, it's like being an athlete at a gym. You're not just working out one part. For me, it's about cross-training. I do my comedy, I do a lot of corporate work, I do a lot of speaking. I have my web series called Best Before, which I produce, I write, I act in, I do all of it, and I have almost 30 episodes out. And I'm just like, for me, it's like, get off your ass, do your shit, stop complaining, and,
that's what it
and just do it.
No, I love
And
that.
we've never been on any of that, so
Damn,
we are
by the way,
too
that-
old
Kate, that's
to be on
an
cage
ageless
shit.
concept. You don't have it's whether you're aging or not, but that's what it takes.
And it's about reinventing yourself. It's about moving on. It's about and it's about just being real with yourself. And you know, if you're not done, do it.
And I think
Like,
that's a benefit of age, actually.
I'm done.
Knowing
I
that.
just
well,
want to
fair
say
enough.
right now.
I agree.
I won't,
With that in
I won't
mind-
be doing any more comedy.
With that
from
in
this
mind, I hope you will all give
That's
yourselves
right.
a round of applause, because I have enjoyed
No.
this conversation.
Okay, fine.
Absolutely.
I'm too
I
tired.
thought I
I'm
was
applauding
dreaming.
just for these
Yeah,
three.
we're just happy for it's.
It's over.
Next time earlier.
We're
I have to
tired.
thank everybody who has been here. Please, humble Howard Glassman.
Thank you,
for
Warren.
being here.
Mark.
Glen
Yeah.
Foster, that Canadian guy. Mike MacDonald.
The kids
and
today.
Kate Davis. And as always, when the comedy show is over, we hope that you join us
At
when
the
we take the
bar.
conversation off stage.
Nice
Good night,
job.
everybody.